Australia have launched a legal challenge after their child was taken into care, following the parents' refusal to allow gender reassignment therapy. We'll be discussing that story with our panel after this short break.
The world is driven by dreamers, shaped by thinkers and those with vision.
Who dares, thinks. We dare to ask.
When old truths seem wrong, when old rules just don't hold, and a new world
Welcome back. Now, a couple in Australia are appealing against a court decision to take their teenage child into care. The parents have refused their teenage daughter's request to change gender and say they're being bullied by the authorities into giving their consent.
The authorities say we will not allow her to change gender, so it's dangerous for her to come back to our house because we will mentally abuse her. They want us to consent to testosterone treatment.
The child, who cannot be named for legal reasons, was born female. At the age of 15, she told her parents she wanted to become a boy. And when the parents refused, she openly contemplated suicide in online posts and was then taken from her home by Child Protection Services. The case has sparked widespread outrage.
The end of parenting as we knew it. We have no rights. Our children can be seriously harmed by the government and medical profession, and we are powerless to stop it.
I'm so sorry for what our society is doing to your family. We've been naive letting it slide this far.
Happened in my family. After age 14, parents have no right to medical information on their children. Tragic.
Well, let's bring in now political commentator Gina Loudon, commentator and lawyer Stephanie Hayden, and women's rights advocate Reese Everson. Good to have you all on. Well, we saw this is clearly something that has sparked a lot of criticism, a lot of discussion. Gina, I wanted to start with you. In cases such as these, and we do actually hear that, this is not the first instance where a child is asking to change gender. Who gets to make the decision?
Well, it should always be the parents, unless, there is a history of abuse that's demonstrable and proven in the courts. You take a child at their most vulnerable age and you take them out of what is secure. We all know that teenagers make irrational mistakes. That's part of being a teenager. Most of us can look back at our teenage years and say we made some very irrational decisions, and that without the guidance and loving support of our parents, and no one loves us more than our parents in most cases, we would have made worse mistakes. So to rip that authority away from parents is often the worst mistake that the courts can do.
Stephanie, I wanted to pick up on something that Gina said there. She said, we all know we all make mistakes. And actually, I was reading about a case in England. A woman said that this is an adult woman in her early 20s. She said she made a mistake. She decided too fast to have a gender reassignment surgery. She now regrets it. And she's been contacted by dozens of people. So what do you say to that? Maybe the child is going too quick into it. It's a parent's job to protect them.
Well, that is always the excuse, isn't it? We start from the assumption that somebody who perceives themselves as being transgender is somehow making a mistake, that they don't understand their own mind, that they're not capable of making a rational, informed decision. It's the sort of nonsense we used to hear in the 1980s over gay people. The fact of the matter is this: every case has to be considered on its merits. I would not particularly consider somebody 15 or 16 to be incapable of making an informed, rational decision. I would, however, consider someone 4 or 5 years of age incapable of making that decision. It comes down to the individual child who has autonomy with their doctors and, yes, ideally with parental influence and parental support. But where that support is not there, sometimes, sadly, it is necessary for the authorities to step in.
Reese, I want to bring you in now. Now, the parents of the child say that they're being bullied into consenting to testosterone treatment. In your opinion, is there any justification for putting such pressure on the legal guardians, on the family?
Absolutely not. And I would take it a step further and say not only are the parents being bullied, but their rights are literally being stripped away from them by the government in this instance in Australia. When you have parents who are, of any teenager, 15, 14-year-olds who are logging in online, we know that from our own experience, mine personally, and just from family members, that teenagers get online, they log into chat groups, and they say, things or how they feel. And also, sometimes those feelings are not solidified. They're just passing thoughts because, teenagehood is an emotional time. Puberty is an emotional time. We're literally pumping with emotions. And so to say that a child who's 12 years old has decided that they want to identify a certain way and that the parents are now going to be forced to allow this child to have hormone therapy, it literally slaps in the face of what the purpose of a parent actually is, which is to guide and provide instruction and correction. And right now, these parents are being stripped of that.
Gina, I wanted to come back to you. Obviously, Stephanie was making a distinction between a 4 and a 5-year-old and a 15 and a 16-year-old. 16-year-olds, for example, in the US and certain states can drive. They can get married with parental consent as well. Do you think it's ever possible for a child or someone under the age of 18 to give an informed consent to sexual reassignment?
No, because we don't let children that age make decisions about having a simple blood test. We don't let children make other decisions. And the argument is null and void when you consider things like you may want a child who's 10 years old may want to drive, or they may want to become an evangelist who goes to North Korea to do their evangelism. And a parent might say, no, child, you're 10 years old. That's a dangerous decision for you at 10. That's why we have parents. Wait until you're 18, and then you can do whatever you want. The thing about this is really politicians in black robes making political decisions. When you consider the science, the real science, we know that sometimes these decisions people can regret later in life, as you pointed to initially. When you look at science that says, there's conflicting science on whether steak is healthy, whether salt is healthy, whether wine is healthy. There is conflicting science on whether these sorts of chemicals being given to children are healthy or not. So let the child wait until he's an adult to make a decision that may affect his or her health for the rest of their life. If they're just waiting a few years, the parents should be the ones who lovingly walk them through this. Not a doctor, not a court. No one should trump the authority of a parent in this situation.
Stephanie, I wanted to come to you. We heard Gina talking about long-term health impacts. Now, cross-sex hormones are available to 16-year-olds in most Western countries. They can cause, according to the NHS in the UK, permanent infertility. Now, surely that's something only an adult can decide to do to themselves, knowing all the information.
It comes down again to informed consent. And also, when do we consider a human being to be an adult for the purpose of making these decisions? Here in the United Kingdom, in certain parts of the UK, Wales and Scotland, 16-year-olds can vote. They can make a decision on who runs this country. They can be members of the armed forces. They can't actually fight in any, wars or anything, but they can be members of the armed forces. They can pay taxes. They can marry with parental consent. If we're going to allow, as a society, 16-year-olds to make those very mature decisions, in my opinion, then it is absolutely outrageous to take this bonkers old-fashioned view that children are somehow the chattels of their parents. They are not. The children have autonomy. They have agency. And providing that they are mature enough to make the decision with suitable guidance from professionals, and yes, ideally with parental input, then that should be the decision of those individuals. Again, where do we draw the line? Would Gina argue, for instance, that homosexual children should not be able to decide that they're homosexual because they might just be having fleeting feelings, or they might make decisions which they regret later in life? The fact of the matter is, most people who transition successfully, and it helps their mental health, their physical health, and their overall well-being. Of course, like anything, you have, one or two which regret it. And we have a case here in the UK at the moment involving Kira Bell, who's now an adult, where that was the case. But that is quite rare. And this thought that the parents should be the divine authority just because they gave birth to their child is, in my opinion, outdated and misconceived.
Reese, I wanted to come to you. Now, if refusing hormone therapy can be considered abuse, and that's a word that we hear a lot, especially in the media when it's talked about, do you think there's an argument to be made that that's a distraction from cases of quote-unquote actual abuse where children are at risk?
Absolutely. And here's the thing. So because of the way that the system is set up, when a child says to their parent, I believe that I'm a girl, even if that child is 8 years old and they're physically a male, the current prevailing practice is to allow that child to determine what they want to do going forward. If the child is in therapy, if the child is seeing a doctor, we are all told that the policy going forward now, or parents are told the policy going forward is to allow that child to determine what they are. And to say anything different is considered abuse. To say or to provide guidance or instruction or wisdom in this manner, or even maybe the parents have a religious belief. If the parent says you are what God made you to be, that is considered abuse by these standards. And so what we're realizing is that, freedom of religion and just the basic rights of a parent are literally being stripped away and being conflated. And the definition of abuse is being conflated and being used in a way that's harmful to actual children who are being abused. And to a point that the other young lady made, the age of consent is 16. So why would we start allowing 8-year-olds and 12-year-olds to make adult decisions? The reason that the age of consent is 16 for allowing a child to have sex is because we don't want to allow children to be exploited, or we don't believe that they have the capacity to consent to sexual relationships. So if you can't consent to sex, how on earth can you determine that you are old enough to want to have a mastectomy at 12 and have your breast removed, or you want to have your gender reassigned? I mean, these are things that a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old don't have the capacity to understand the long-standing implications of and some of the issues, because as you made clear, there are students, people like Patrick Mitchell, who changed their gender from male to female and then realized, no, I actually should be a boy. And so at 14 years old, he's now trying to go fly to Korea in order to have his sex change undone. And so these are things that, parents should not be allowing or should not be compelled to force their children to explore this. They should be allowed to wait and see.
Can I just ask one also final question really quickly, Gina? What do we do then? How do we provide a way out for children who are suffering from gender dysphoria? What should happen if there's a conflict with parents? Really quickly, please.
Yeah, well, the burden should fall on the parents to make the best, most loving decision for their families. There are two things going against children in these situations. One is if they're ripped from the loving arms of their parents, and two is if they're forced to make a decision too young that they might regret. The suicide rates are astonishingly higher. Your other guest was wrong about that. For children that make these decisions, the younger they are when they make these decisions, the more high the suicide rate is for them later in life once they've transitioned. So we need to be very careful about these children being exploited for political reasons.
Well, it's certainly something that's got a lot of people talking. Thank you so much, three of you. That was Gina Loudon, Stephanie Hayden and Reese Everson. Always good to see you. That's all from us. I'll be back at the hour. Hope to see you then.